thinking of buying a jet and also maybe a helicopter so that when I fly my jet, I can land and then I can get my helicopter from the airport to my yacht. What do I need to know? Welcome to the channel. I'm so delighted to welcome Giovanni, founder and CEO of G&G Aviation. Giovanni, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me here.
How are you? So basically, Giovanni is a jet and aviation and also helicopter specialist.
The first question is to know exactly what you need to do with those equipment. And that's not something that comes very, very often. Normally people come to us and say, I want to buy a Gulfstream or a Global because their neighbor or friend has one of those, but maybe that's not ideal for their requirements. So first thing we want to know exactly is where are you usually flying, how far, and how often, how many hours or how many trips in the year.
So for most people, it's kind of like how many passengers will probably come with me. Is that kind of important as well?
Yes, although business jets do not have a wide range of passengers, let's say that except for the very small ones, they go from 8 to maximum 19, and 19 is an almost hard point because of the change of regulation if you have more than 19 passengers on an aircraft. So the majority in reality is between 8 and 15 passengers. These are the most common configuration. And of course, the larger ones are for airplanes that have a long range. Although that's a requirement that many people have, but in the reality and in the statistics, nobody ever flies with that many people on board.
I was going to say, I mean, for me, when I'm talking to other people, it may be husband and wife and 3 children. So 5 is kind of an average number. So is that the sort of jet I could source, and what sort of range could I get on a 5-seater jet?
Well, as I said, if you go for a smaller number of seats, normally this turns into a smaller airplane with a smaller range. So if you are in Europe, you can cover almost all Europe with almost any jet. And so for European customer, it's pretty easy. They can decide on different parameters. The range is not an issue if their flights are within Europe. If they are in the US, it's already different because flying coast to coast is 6 or 7 hours of flight, and you need a much longer range.
So some of the questions you need to ask yourself is, how often do you fly? And my understanding is if you're doing 150 hours and above, then you should probably look at owning your own jet. And then it's a question of if you're flying 5 people, 3 people, what sort of jet size do I need?
Yeah.
And then obviously distance. So I cover distance?
Yeah, this distance. So there are airplanes that can fly almost the entire world.
Wow. But so how much does that cost, Giovanni? If I wanted to buy a jet to fly me all around the world?
Well, you can spend up to $70 million.
Wow.
But the question is, how often you will take such a flight?
Some of the clients have their beds now. So they have an area where they have their own sleeping accommodation, they have their own dining accommodation, and they have their kind of living day-to-day quarters.
Yeah, they may have the office. Everything is available on airplanes these days. But again, how often can somebody fly the other side of the world? There are certainly a few people that may need that fairly often, but the majority would probably be good with a range of up to 6,000 nautical miles, which covers the big part of the world that is normally served with this flight.
How far is 6,000 nautical miles? How far can I fly from London to?
Well, with 6,000 nautical miles, you fly from London to many of the main cities in the US. Wow. And many of the main cities in Asia. Of course, you never reach Australia and maybe the far end of Asia as well. And you go South Africa, for example. So it is a huge range. If you look it on the map, it covers almost everywhere you may wish to go. Not exactly everywhere.
And what sort of size jet would I need to buy to make that 6,000 nautical mile trip? And what would it cost me?
let's say that talking about brand new jets, you need a Global 6000 or similar from competitors, a Gulfstream 650, something like that. And it would cost 55 to 70 million, 55 to 65. It depends very much also on the configuration that you decide to have.
I mean, that's an enormous budget. So the majority of people wouldn't afford that. There are a lot of people that do, but I was thinking more probably from what I've seen, $3 to $15 million range, which would be a flight from, say, Guernsey or Jersey to Mallorca or to Rome.
Yeah, in that case, you're fine with 3, maximum 4,000 nautical miles. And again, if you're based in Europe, the reach is pretty good even with that kind of range. And again, it's a matter of how many times. If you do one long flight a year and you do all the rest within Europe or within this kind of range of 4,000 nautical miles, my advice would be to buy the jet that you need all the times and rent the jet you need or charter it when you have the long
So that's
flight.
Really good advice, Giovanni. So basically, buy the jet that you're going to use the most. And if you have to do a long haul, rent it.
Yeah, because of course the larger jet can also do the shorter routes, but it's not ideal for those. The cost for doing the route is higher, the cost of ownership is higher, and the maintenance is higher. And if you don't need all that power, there's no reason to have that.
So your job in the aviation industry is effectively you search for jets for clients. If I have a client that says, hey, I want to buy my own jet, you will then interview them, fact find to find out what it is they need, and then you would manage that process for them?
Yes, we can manage the full process from A to Z. Basically, the first thing is, an interview with the client to understand exactly what he needs and what he would like, which, as I mentioned in the beginning, often is not the same thing. And try maybe even to balance between the two, the wish and the real need. And then we go on the market. One feature that we offer is very appreciated in this kind of environment. We try to be as quiet as possible. So we are never working on big or large advertising. If the customer comes to me and wants a jet, we try to find a jet which is totally off market and have a deal directly with the owner of the jet without too much publicity on the deal itself. We don't need that. And so we are not using wide channels, but narrow channels, point to point, directly with people. And we have a database where we gather information on whatever is available, not on the mainstream market. And we use that. We receive the request. Very often we can match it with something of the information we already have, so we can point directly to a particular aircraft.
So discretion.
And if possible, we try to offer 2 or 3 different options to the customer. So because sometimes they don't like the color of the interior, the color of the exterior, or any other feature of the aircraft. So they may have a little choice and maybe even a little bit of budget range, if possible. It's not always possible. There are cases that even finding one aircraft is difficult. There are cases where this option can be offered, and we try to do it, but not 10, because then it's difficult to take a choice. And we, let's say, help them in the entire process until the airplane is actually delivered, and even after that, because buying the plane is a first step. But then the airplane has to be managed. And of course, we suggest always not to try to set up a series of facilities to manage the aircraft, but rely on existing reliable companies and operators that do this job and do it pretty well. And what we do for certain clients, they give the airplane under management to an operator, but we keep overviewing for the customer what the operator is doing. So it's not just left alone to the operator to decide what's going on with the aircraft. We can still be the owner eye to see what's going on. and advise also on the ways to maximize the utilization of the aircraft or the availability, or better or diminish the cost of operation if it's possible, and sometimes even advise to let them charter the aircraft. Some people is scared of chartering their own airplane because they don't want other people on board, but it is a good way to keep the airplane need to fly. So if you keep it too much on ground, it's not as good as it may seem.
That's fantastic. So effectively, you offer a full service, helping clients to search, buy, deliver, and manage their own private jet.
And maintenance, or the majority of these aircraft are supported by maintenance programs from the manufacturers. And this is certainly a good thing and is a standard in the industry. Personally, I'm not always favorable to these programs because they require to advance a lot of the cost of maintenance that may happen in many years from now. So there are other ways to better handle the risks. The program is normally two things: is covering the cost of the standard maintenance and covering the risk of the unscheduled events that may occur on an airfield. While I'm very keen to protect the uncertainties with a sort of insurance, on the normal maintenance, everything is pretty much known and can be handled in a different way and maybe deferring the payment of such costs at a later stage.
Wow, so much to think about and consider. So if money was no object for you, what private jet would you buy? What's your favorite?
Well, I would not buy a very long range jet. I would probably buy a mid-size. That's for based on my possible utilization.
So when you say mid-size, what do you mean by mid-size?
I mean a Challenger 605.
And how far can that fly, and how much does that cost?
That would cost 30 to 35 million probably, depending on the configuration. And of course, I'm talking about new, but you can buy used for much less.
Yeah.
And used airplanes in this field are not really used. There are airplanes with 10 years since they were built that have 2,000 hours. 2,000 hours is zero on an aircraft. Airplanes are fully regulated. Everything is controlled by time and thing. 2,000 hours is the very start of the life of an airplane. So if it's a 10 years old, but it has 2,000 hours, I would seriously consider, because the price discount versus a new one would be major.
So it's okay to be old, guys, if you're an airplane. So 2,000 hours on the clock. So if I wanted a 10-year-old Challenger, what would that cost me? As opposed to new $30 million, what would a second-hand one cost?
Well, you may have 15, 20, even below 15.
Okay.
Each one is an individual case because it depends on many other parameters. But yes, let's say probably 15 is the bottom and up.
And always we have finance providers that can finance these purchases should you so choose. And as we've spoken with other providers, you can do lease arrangements, operating lease arrangements, and hybrid arrangements, which is fantastic. So what else do I need to know, Giovanni, about buying? Is there anything we've missed in terms of what's important to consider when buying your first private jet?
Well, the other important thing is the structure, because yes, you can give it to a management company, but
wow, so structure.
The acquisition is ownership, is VAT issues and things, and there are several specializing firms that can advise on that, and that's an important part that is normally left aside, but is
so registration and ownership is equally important to when you buy. I also understand that pilots and crew and chartering. So if you have an Isle of Man registration, I was told, you couldn't charter your own private jet.
Yeah, there is a very big difference between different registration in different countries. And one aspect which is very sensible is VAT. Because if you pay VAT on such an amount and you cannot recover it quickly, that's a huge amount of money. So changing jurisdiction, or even the way you import the aircraft, maybe from outside Europe, and you import in Europe is not very much the same if you're importing one airport or another one,
So
for different regulation and nation activity. So that's something to be taken care, and it's not something we do directly, but we can certainly advise on people that can take care of it and coordinate them.
Okay, so where you buy a private jet and where you own it in terms of structure is so important, and it's vital to get professional advice when doing so. What else do we need to think about, Giovanni? Is there anything we're missing?
No, the basics are here. Then each case is slightly different. There are no two transactions which are exactly the same, even for the same kind of airplane. And therefore, that's the need why the advice is very important, because whatever amount a candidate owner can pay to the advisors, this amount will be a very small fraction of the savings or security that he can get from using the right people to advise him on the acquisition. There are so many fields. The insurance is something. You can buy the insurance for 10 or for 15, just to a round number. And in the end of the year, that makes a difference. And maybe you have the same coverage, depending on how you look at that, or you set it up, let's say.
Fantastic. So if you were starting out again in your career and you were 18 years young, what advice would you be giving yourself today?
Probably I would go straight on the business jets, remaining in this field, because I started with airlines and I spent some decades mainly dealing with airlines and airliners, which is a totally different world, while this world of business aviation is first is more exciting, and it's also needing more support from experts, because airlines have their own staff that they can take care of the different aspects we just mentioned. They have a legal department, a fiscal department, and so on, while any private owner or even a corporation doing something else is not structured to have the right inputs for the aircraft acquisition and management. So there is more added value in serving business jet customers than airlines.
So being a specialist is the advice you'd give yourself. But what about skills? Confidence, belief, resilience, academic. What else? Is there anything else you would tell yourself, or you should have done, or wish you had done, or you would do if you were starting again?
My passion when I was at that age, I would have bet everything that I was in the automobile industry. And I didn't, by very little. I was hired by a car manufacturer, but then I came the opportunity to come into aviation. And frankly, I never regret of the change, although I still love cars, but airplanes are a different level and a different kind of business. And I'm glad of it. It's also a very nice and good community. It's not too large. I cannot say we know everybody, each other, but it's a community that has its own gatherings during the year, and it's always a pleasure to meet the friends in the industry. Of course, it's always good people in the industry normally, and so it's a nice environment to work in. So not an easy one.
So if I'm a much younger individual looking to start, what shows should I go to learn about the industry?
Well, the major, if you are in Europe, the major air shows are a good start, like Paris and Farnborough, which are alternate every year. And for business jets, the best is eBase in Geneva in May, which takes place every year. And as we are here in Monaco, we also follow some cross-border events like the yacht show, because the customer base is the same, whether you buy a yacht, a jet, or a helicopter, or actually they have them all, because the yacht comes with the crew the owner comes with the jet to an airport, and hopefully he would like to jump on his helicopter and get landing on the yacht. And we can satisfy at least two of the three and advise on who to talk to for the yacht itself.
So that's fantastic. Giovanni, thank you so much for today. If you have any questions, comment below. I'm very happy to introduce you to Giovanni, who will personally look after any of your jet requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.